Hey, so I don't know about you, but when I first watched the first Wicked movie a few years ago, I got really close to thinking that the movie really sucked. And it's all because of the odd Oz dust scene. So, hi. You can call me Lady Grayce. I use she, her pronouns. I have a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Dramatic Writing, and I want to welcome you to my show about how writing techniques shape great stories, and also how they shape bad stories. And also how they shape mediocre stories, because it's inescapable, and writing techniques are the core of what makes stories work, fail, or do neither. It's a prison of our own design. Well, maybe not your design. It's a prison of my design. I'm a writer. Um, Today, I'm going to be talking about how adaptations, by changing the structure of a story, inherently changes how said story inherently feels. And you don't have to agree with me on this or my take on Wicked. Honestly, I'm not 100% sure I agree with my take on Wicked, but stick with me because I think you'll find this interesting. So, back to the Ozda scene, the basic way that this scene functions is it's where Elphaba and Galinda go from being hated enemies to being best friends. It's how you get from what is this feeling to popular. Uh, the basic outline is when they're getting ready for a big party at the Ozdust, Galinda decides to trick Elphaba into wearing an ugly hat to the big party because she thinks it'll be embarrassing for her. Elphaba, touched by what's seemingly an act of kindness, in turn gets Galinda a place in her magic lessons, which is like the one thing Galinda most wanted from the school. And the play scene in the play, the scene is characterized by very quick turnarounds. Elphaba is paid a fake act of kindness by Galinda, and she immediately goes and does the nicest thing she can do in return. The quick turnaround is actually kind of important because this is what reveals Elphaba's true character to Galinda, not as a mean, self-centered loser, but as a sad, defensive girl who genuinely wants people to like her, but is just kind of used to them hating her on sight. And so, when immediately afterwards Galinda's prank comes due, Galinda puts her neck out to try and save Elphaba very quickly. And you can probably tell the big change in this scene, it's a hell of a lot longer than it was in the play. Like, just the dance scene from the Oz ballroom is longer than the entirety of Dancing Through Life was in the play. And yeah, that kind of kills the momentum, obviously. There's like way more time of Elphaba embarrassing herself and dancing in front of the crowd. And this was the moment where I was like, the play did things a certain way on purpose. Like, it wasn't an accident that this was quick. It didn't happen just because they didn't have the time. The reason the turnaround was quick was because the momentum was important. It was important to the feel of the story, and it was important to establishing this bond. The fact that Galinda immediately puts her social reputation at stake to try and help Elphaba is one of the most endearing things she does in the entire play. And in this movie, like, it kind of feels like Galinda's just thinking through things a lot more. Like, she's like, what's the vibe here? Can I get away with this? And obviously she decides not to, but like, kind of felt to me like you're trying to turn an appetizer into a meal without understanding that it worked best as an appetizer on purpose. So, $1,000 question. Why did they do it then? Like, did they just not get the story? And the answer is because this is the midpoint of the story. This is a version of the 3-act structure. This specific version has specific plot beats. This was devised by Blake Snyder in his famous screenwriting book, Save the Cat. I'm going to be using it. I know that plays have a different kind of act structure, Wicked included. I'm going to keep using this because it sort of maps on loosely pretty well. Just know that when I'm talking about acts, I am not talking about like how acts work in plays. But yeah, um, in the original play, Dancing Through Life happens around here. It's end of Act 1, beginning of Act 2. This is setup. Dancing Through Life is a lot of setup done very efficiently. And that's like, that is why the quick turnarounds happen. It also makes sense emotionally, and they built the scene and the story around this being the point where a lot of setup happens. But it happened because there was a lot of setup. Unfortunately, the movie cut this thing in two. And now your old midpoint is the new climax. So you need a new midpoint. And you know what? What lands right around in the middle of the first act and a half of of this play? The Ozdas ballroom scene does. And you know what I have to say about that? Sorry. You know what I have to say about that is, oh no, it was the right choice. The Ozdas Ballroom was the right choice if you're gonna invent a new midpoint. It's a very grand set. This is a big emotional turning point for the most important relationship in the play, movies, whatever. And they do a lot of it. Like they build a lot of strong tension. It works very well, and they sort of upset the much slower turnaround by also giving you a much greater payoff, because that's how big midpoints work. You get a lot more time of Galinda sitting there before joining in, but you also get a lot more time of Galinda dancing with Elphaba and a lot more unspoken intimacy. It does work, and yes, this was kind of a change they had to make, because if you try to play your movie like it doesn't have a midpoint, like you just sort of play the entire first two and the entire first 2.8 acts of your movie like it's all just act 1, that's not going to work. It's going to feel way more like you're just padding things out. The movie's going to feel like nothing of any value happened until the very end. So yeah, this was a necessary choice, and this was the right choice. The thing is, you can argue this is that the movie's version is even better than the play's version if you're way more into spectacle. And I still kind of like the play's version more. Don't get me wrong, I get that to a certain extent, the reason I like it more is similar to the instinct that made child Lady Grayce dislike the Percy Jackson movies for being different instead of for being bad. I am very attached to the way that the play did it because that was a big thing I was really invested in for a lot longer than the movie came out. But I think it's valid I still think it's valid to have a preference. I mean, everyone's going to have a preference, but it is worth pointing out that these two versions of the play have very different emotional texture. And I think that it's still kind of fair, at least for me, to kind of prefer the play version. But the thing is, regardless of what version you prefer, it is clear that the structure has completely changed the emotions of the scene. And that's not bad. It's not necessarily bad, but sometimes it is. And now we're going to be talking about Final Fantasy VII because, yeah, I finally played the Final Fantasy VII remake fairly recently. I know I'm a few years behind. What can I say? I was never the biggest Final Fantasy VII fan, but when I got around to playing this remake, it did kind of annoy me. And no, I'm not talking about the time ghosts. I am also not talking about the padding, even though, let's take a second and I'll admit, yeah, the padding was a lot worse than it is in Wicked. This is a massive problem. So much new stuff happens, and so little of it really accomplishes anything or has extra emotion packed into it. There are good versions of the fleshing out that the Final Fantasy VII remake does. I loved the wall market section. Everyone I've seen make a review on this game loves the wall market section, but also the second Mako reactor section kind of sucked, and it was like 3 or 4 chapters of nothing happening, just building up to what was essentially the inciting incident of the first game, and it was not very emotional, and I don't like it very much. What I'm actually going to be talking about is the lighting. This might be a little bit out of my wheelhouse. I am more of a writer than I am an artist, but the thing is, visual presentation is a part of writing too. Like making it clear how something is shown off. That also informs the story you're telling. And I care a lot about storytelling, and also not a fan of how Remake did it at all. Like, just from here, you can see this has very artificial green tinged lighting. It feels a lot more grungy. This is completely natural lighting. Like the environment is way more detailed, and it does a lot of the heavy lifting. Like, full props to the artist behind this thing. Clearly the artist behind this game did an amazing job. But like, it's kind of hard to feel that the same way that you can feel this strong of a lighting choice. And like, they even like changed the physical structure of the world. So like, in the original game, the whole point of Midgar is that there's basically no natural light, because there's basically no nature at all, because it's a company town made out of Shinra's metal and manufacturing, and it completely isolates everyone from nature. In this version, they knocked down giant holes in all the walls to let natural light in, and that's just like, that is completely contrary to what the point was. Like, especially like, it's very frustrating because a large part of what makes visual world building so strong is building in lore and in story reasons that make a lot of sense for the very moody and emotional way that your world looks. And Midgar had that. It had it perfectly, and then they knock down the walls. They get rid of it on purpose to let more natural light in, despite the fact that there being no nature was the point. It's not supposed to look normal. It's supposed to look cyberpunk. And I think there are a few reasons they may have done this. First off, they need to add visual variety. This game. Second off, well, 1A really. This like sort of curtails into another critique I had about the remake, which is, one of the appeals of the original Final Fantasy VII was just how much stuff was packed into it. Like, it was never a game that was padded out. There was just a million different things there, and you didn't even have to experience most of them. You didn't even have to experience some of the important stuff. A big part of that game's feel is that it's so big you could get lost in it. And I feel like part of the visual variety was meant to simulate this, make it look like there's a lot more in this game than there actually was. And second off, to capitalize on more realistic lighting technology. And you know what? I'm going to pause real quick to go on a bit of a tangent. I know I said I was talking about adaptations at the start of this stream. I know that the Final Fantasy VII Remake is a remake. They aren't adapting it into another medium, but I think it shares a lot of the same DNA as an adaptation, specifically for a reason like this. They are remaking Final Fantasy VII into a completely different video gaming landscape where there are completely different tools, and game creation skews much more on the quote-unquote cinematic and realistic side than it ever did when the original Final Fantasy VII was made. And I can see that being another reason for them to change the lighting to be realistic. I mean, they've got way more technology, and Square Enix is one of those AAA companies that's always in pursuit of the most realistic high-def graphics. So of course they're going to want to capitalize on realistic lighting. The issue is bringing something down to reality kind of like negates the fantasy. Like Midgar stops feeling larger than life when the lighting changes, and it especially stops feeling larger than life when you combine that with the fact that all of the NPCs in this game just dress like fucking people. Like, a lot of the mood is lost in part because of the lighting, because they are chasing realism instead of mood and atmosphere. But jumping back to the variety topic, Midgar is a whole game now. Environments have to feel different. Like, if you go through an 80-hour game and everything feels exactly the same, or rather everything feels exactly one of two ways, it's either the green artificially lit slums, or it's the also green but darker factory levels. Yeah, that's going to get tiring. Like I did point out that thing about padding, but also if you're going to change Midgar, which was like 10 hours long, to be an 80-hour JRPG, yeah, you got to you got to give more variety, or it's not really gonna work. It's just gonna feel tiring. You're just gonna be so used to the same thing over and over again. The game would kind of break if it was just the same thing over and over again. So, like, yeah, they did need variety, but the issue is that the variety no longer has any cohesion. Like, the art design feels cohesive, but the lighting fails to capitalize on the same continuous atmospheric mood that tied the original together. And jumping back off this, look at how this looked. It was dystopian. It was very cyberpunk, in part because of the heavy use of green, because green isn't something that's used in color grading usually. Like, if green gets used, it's supposed to point out that things are weird and wrong and artificial. And the new lighting, first off, let's be honest, this is fucking beautiful. Like, again, I don't want to criticize the artistry. The people who were given the assignment to make this game look good and to look like this, knocked it out of the fucking park. Like, just jumping between this scene with Aerith and this scene with Aerith. God, this looks so much better. It's way prettier. But also, this could be anywhere. This just looks like some place. This looks like Midgar. And yes, it's visually lacking, but can you imagine if the lighting was the same, but they had this level of character rendering and modeling? The idea of beauty existing within this shitty cyberpunk city would have had such a stronger contrast and feel. You wouldn't have to have it told to you. You could just see it on the screen. But yeah, that's the other thing that annoys me. There was light in the original game. Like, one of my big issues with this is it's kind of just too bright. There's too much natural light. I've shown you these red circles. It really annoys me that there's a bunch of natural light in the super artificial city. But it's not because there shouldn't be light in Midgar. It's, if anything, because there was light in the original Midgar. The church and Aerith's home are some of the only places that feel unique and like nature could actually live. It's very important. It's very important for the character storytelling of Aerith because so heavily associating her with a place that visually, due to the lighting and not just the environment design, feels like the only place with actual light or where actual nature could exist, really tells you something about Aerith's character. You don't have to have them tell you about how much Aerith loves nature or how in tune she is with it, because it's on the screen. And like, again, they do visually do their best to recreate these locations. I don't have a picture of the church in here, but Aerith's house, texture, like in the way it's visually constructed in terms of modeling and animation, looks great. But there's no contrast. Like, this is what the Sector 5 slums look like in the original, and this is what Aerith's house looks like. This is what the slums look like in the remake. This is what Aerith's house looks like. Like, I'm not the only one who spent a lot of times in the slums of the Sector 7 and 5 and kind of thought, it feels like they could grow flowers anywhere. Like, yes, this is the only place where any greenery happens. Any greenery tends to exist, which is undercut a bit by the fact that, as you can tell, the colors are very washed out here. But it doesn't feel like the only place that it could exist. Like, really, it feels like anyone determined enough could probably grow some flowers in Midgar, which, again, the whole point, the whole visual cohesion is that this is a city separated from Midgar, separated from nature. And the reason that was important is because nature's the whole theme of Final Fantasy VII. This is about seeing people being forcibly isolated. Midgar is about seeing people forcibly isolated from nature and the small ways in which nature still endures. That was the point. That was the visual storytelling. And like, so the literal information that Remake conveys is the same. There's no greenery. There's no greenery outside of Aerith's house and the church. So you might say, "Hey, you're overreacting. All of the same information is there. The lighting's just a little different. I'm sorry you don't like realism, but it's not bad just because it's different." But the thing is, yeah, the building blocks are still there, but they don't feel like they're there. Like, the whole point of visual storytelling is that it's supposed to bypass your logic and just sort of implant the knowledge in you through vibes. The reason visual storytelling exists is so that you don't have to use dialogue to communicate things. And I'm sorry, I don't think that the remake Midgar is able to bypass your logic in the same way. Like, if anything, the visual storytelling is done through logic. You don't enter Aerith's house and get struck by how beautiful and natural this place is in such a dystopian hellscape. You go, oh, hey, there's flowers here. Oh, hey, there's water here. Haven't seen that around. So, like, in my mind, that's kind of a failure of visual storytelling. And like, it was, and the thing is, this game doesn't need to be efficient. The original game needed to be efficient when establishing everything about its characters. It needed to be able to establish things about Aerith visually, bypassing your logic and hitting you in the emotions, because Midgar was a small part of a very big game. They had other stuff to get to, but because the remake is splitting everything up, the remake is splitting everything up. The remake, in some cases, is longer than the original, despite only tackling the prologue. It's expanding it's expanding a single chapter of Final Fantasy VII into an entire full-length prestige action RPG. It has the time, and but the thing is, for the certain point, it's just time for the sake of time. Atmospheric, as I was saying, atmospheric storytelling is a cheat code. They don't need to cheat, but they don't need to bypass your emotions, because they've got all the time in the world to explain and show you things in less effective terms. They can peel back the layers of this story as much as they want, because they can just spread the layers of that story out through the other 60 hours of the game they have to fill up. The whole point of this game is that it's making a story less compact just so it can spend so much more time explaining everything to you. And I might be overreacting. I can be a pedant occasionally, but I am curious what you guys think about the Final Fantasy VII remake or the Wicked movie. Are there any adaptations you thought had similar issues, or are there maybe adaptations you thought sidestepped the issues? But honestly, the takeaway I want to leave you with is that changes aren't inherently bad, but changing the structure of a story can and will change the emotional feel of it. And it's not bad or wrong if your audience decides that they don't like the new version as much. But I will be back next week, and we'll be keeping the adaptation train rolling because I'm going to be talking about the Supergirl movie and, much more important, the Woman of Tomorrow comic that inspired it. This is a very complex movie. I'm excited to tackle it. I especially because I think if you've just seen the movie and haven't read the comic, you're gonna be surprised by some things. Also, join our Discord. The link should be in the bio in the video description. But that's all I have to say right now. If you want, you can talk to me in the Discord, ask me questions if any questions you have later on. But I will see you guys next week.